You're watching Raptors Today. I'm Savanna Hamilton alongside Sherman Hamilton and Paul Jones. Now, the Raptors dropped their first road game of the series. They're now 1-6 in what was a winnable game against the Suns, but let's look ahead. With the road trip loss, here is a look ahead to the games. We got Sacramento, Golden State, and Portland. Now, I want to turn our attention to something that happened off the court over, yesterday, but then the past couple of days, it's been a reoccurring topic, and I would love to get both of your thoughts. Sherman, please kick us off. What are your thoughts on the event that happened yesterday with the Capitol being, stormed or taken over or even just let in? There's been a bunch of reports that I've heard. I know that. And how did you feel that the Raptors and the NBA responded to it?
Well, before I get to that, Savannah, we'll go to a day before where the verdict came out that Jacob Blake shooting, the officers that shot Jacob Blake weren't going to face any charges. And it's one of those difficult things for the Black community to swallow again. It seemed like the violence was excessive and unnecessary. And here we are a day later after that, dealing with white Capitol Hill being overthrown, basically taken over and infiltrated by protesters and Donald Trump supporters. It's just a lot to digest. The NBA did what they could in terms of showing their unity and the fact that they're aware and they're going to stand up together. But it's difficult to see that happen, Savannah. It's tough to watch that type of insurgence and understand that type of vitriol is out there. That negative energy is out there. It's consistent. And it's another, I think, factor that points to us understanding what white privilege looks like and how it can be on display in a very overt and a very arrogant way, to feel that is something that they have the right to do. So it was sad. It was, I think, for many Americans, it was embarrassing. And it's really another reminder that this battle isn't done. The fight has to go on, and we have to be loud about how we fight this battle.
Paul, what were your thoughts on this happened the past few days?
To kind of echo what Sherm said, it's disheartening. And for people that don't think race in sports or politics in sports go together, they do. Because when these athletes, be they NBA, WNBA, women's national soccer play, whatever it is that they play, that's only a small portion of their life. The rest of their lives are lived as regular citizens. And this is tied into the whole, racial injustice that has been happening for so long. Let's face it, when the events happened with George Floyd and Jacob Blake, the NBA, the WNBA in particular, where you have a strong African-American presence, basically mobilized the voters and said, we want change. Let's get to the vote. Let's get to the polls. Let's vote people in and vote other people out. And what happened was the 40th president of the United States, and I'm really hesitant to use his name, was upset because he was voted out. He was voted out. So he's upset now. And then he starts to perpetuate these lies about the election fraud and things weren't done properly. And he lets out these incendiary comments that leads to this insurgence that we saw. And then he sits back and does nothing. So for guys in the NBA, they look at it and they say, well, wait a minute, there's a selective enforcement of the law. There's one set of standards when, as Draymond Green stands up, says people are standing up and saying, we want justice, we want peace. There's a significant amount of force applied there, yet other people can walk into the Capitol building, occupy the Speaker of the House's chair, come into chambers, walk away with podiums, make a mockery of, American, political leaders by hanging flags and taking pictures with them, and nothing's done. And here we are a day later now, they're saying, well, we have video of these people, and if anybody has any tips, well, wait a minute. If you're enforcing the law the same way, those people need to be arrested and taken down and booked and processed the same way you would had it been a Black Lives Matter situation. There were over 14,000 arrests after the George Floyd protests. I didn't hear of any yesterday at all. I'm still waiting. I'm sure there were some, but I don't think the number comes close to that. So it creates a polarity in watching the way the laws are enforced. And it's, as Sherm said, it's hard to take as a member of the Black community because, as Doc Rivers said, nobody wants to say it, but I'll say it. Could you imagine if those were Black Lives Matter people trying to get into the Capitol building? It would be a lot different. Draymond Green said, don't call them protesters, they're terrorists.
Paul, I couldn't have said it better myself. And like, I was gonna bring up what Doc Rivers said myself as well, because we all know it would have been a different scene. It would have been a different result. And it's blatantly obvious, but with how the protests for BLM have been handled in the past versus how how they've handled in Washington. Now, let's see what our team has to say about what the events of the most recent, racial discrimination has been. They spoke to us last night.
I think it's a reflective time, right? You play two anthems, and you got some quiet time there. And I was next to Monty there from the Suns, and the guys, as you kind of look around, everybody's just kind of head down, reflecting on the state of the country, So just a moment to reflect, and I think it was a nice show of solidarity with both teams, both coaching staffs.
We watched this thing unfold today, and I think we just spoke about just coming together as two franchises, and there's a lot of players. We just kind of wanted to show our unity together because at the end of the day we all stand together, and just kind of showing a moment of solidarity within, our two teams. Honestly, the basketball doesn't matter. Today, what occurred, on Capitol Hill was kind of disturbing in the fact that, people were allowed to basically rush and take over a federal building without any type of enforcement to not do that, and just doing whatever they want. If they were people of color, I think it would have been a whole different situation. So, honestly, we say 2021 is a new year, but the same situations are still prevalent in our face, and then what happened with Kenosha and the officer not being charged, just kind of a slap in the face to Black people and all over the world.
Anything we can do to kind of band together. I think just want to show that we were united as players and brothers and NBA family. We're united, and we all kind of stand on the same side of things, and we all believe that what's going on is completely wrong, and we understand that. So I think the message is just to continue to stick together and keep fighting, the fight, and see how much good we can do.
Now, Paul, you mentioned the numbers, and producer Pat and Jake behind the scenes, they actually gave me some updated numbers as of today. Yesterday, there was 14 arrests, and today there's up to 70. But like you said, nothing in comparison to BLM protesters being arrested, which you mentioned was 14,000. Am I correct?
That was a report that I saw just over the whole time in all the cities across America during the George Floyd protest. But it's sad. It's sad that there's a double standard. There was a tweet from Kevin Love in the midst of it all where he said, "I can't believe what's going on in Washington right now," and the blatant double standard when it comes to enforcement of the law. And this is from Kevin Love. I see as a pretty conscious guy in the NBA, and it doesn't matter what race, color, creed he is. He sees right and wrong, and I think that's the way it should be.
Yeah. Now we got to switch gears and get back to talking a little bit about Raptors basketball, as this is a Raptors Today show. And we got to talk about the struggles. And Sherman, I'll go to you with this. Now we see that the third quarter is a bit of a weaker rotation for them. We see, if you look at the board right now, you'll see that there's a 5.5 differential between the last 6 games. Now, Sherm, we're relying on different rotations. It might change up the flow of the game. Give me your thoughts on what the Raptors should focus on to change this, to make sure that the game flows a little bit better.
Well, I think, Savannah, first things first, I mean, we all know this as people who've played basketball before, is that those first 2-3 minutes out of the half, you really got to establish some things. You got to try and take control. If you're down, you got to try and reduce that deficit. If you're up, you want to extend it. But you do so much establishing who you are coming out of the locker room. And the Raptors haven't been able to do that. In fact, we've seen slippage starting in the second quarter that spills over to the third quarter. And I really thought, in their last game, they just struggled. I mean, when a team gets that hot from the three-point line, you really have to really get down deep and get them off the line and chase them out. And I thought that Phoenix just condensed the defense way too much off the dribble, attacked the middle, and were able to really free up the three-point line. Kyle Lowry said this a few days ago. He says teams are looking at them like it's time to eat. There's really no fear in teams when they're coming into the paint for the Raptors. They feel like they can attack and continue to attack without any concern for repercussions of getting their shot blocked or any type of rim protection from the Raptors. So when they're playing downhill like that and they're able to open up the three-point line, it's going to be a problem. But I think it becomes keeping the ball in front of you, number one. You got to make sure you don't get broken down off the dribble as much as they do. And then they've got to be able to get out and chase people out of the three-point line. Easier said than done. But the back end of that is you've got to be able to defensive rebound. If you can't complete the defensive possession with the rebound, then you're going to continually give up that three-point line off of trying to scramble out to get to shooters. So there's a few elements, but you just got to keep the ball in front of you and do a better job containing that dribble.
Somebody who has done a better job has been Pascal Siakam. And Jonesy, I'll go to you for this because if you look at, his stats, over the past 4 games, he's averaging 16 points, but against Boston and Phoenix, he's had 22 and 32. Kind of reminded me of the old Pascal Siakam. It's getting me excited, to be honest. Despite the results of the game, I'm happy that he's starting to find his stride. Give me your thoughts, Jonesy, about what you're seeing on the court for him.
Well, I thought he played with terrific energy last night. As a matter of fact, the whole team did. I thought they played well enough to win. And, you heard Sherm talk about the defensive breakdowns. Those were the things they could have cleaned those up. It would have been different. But I think Pascal showed his leadership last night. He played aggressively. He played like that guy that we're used to seeing, taking the ball to the basket, finishing inside, getting to the free throw line, and playing quickly on the catch and not waiting for the defense to dictate to him what he had to do. He was the aggressor, and I like that. And I saw some of that in the Boston game. And the other thing was he was able to stay out of foul trouble. It's really underplayed how much foul trouble impedes your game and takes away your aggressiveness. So the fact that he was able to be the aggressor last night, I really like that. He simplified his game, made the easy pass, drove it, took the open shot when it was there, made quick decisions. I liked what I saw from him. And in a sense, it's too bad that the Raptors weren't able to take advantage of that full effort by Pascal last night because, as I said, I think they played with enough energy and played well enough for a win. They needed to clean a few things up, though.
For sure. Now I have to go to another conversation I had earlier today on RTX, but I'll be right back with the two of you right after. This is RTX, and joining me today, a familiar face, obviously, we got Akil Augustine, host of Raptors Rundown. Akil, nice to have you back, even though we're so used to you, so,
Wow.
And, of course, we have Will Strickland, a familiar face to NBA TV Canada, but unfamiliar to RTX. So, Will, it's great. This is your first time. Nice to have you. He's the host of the Open Run podcast. What do you mean, bro, Akil?
Will's old news. Anyways,
That's all right. Tighten up your hate cape to get your hate rate up. We see it.
You're straight. All right, guys, we got some serious topics to get to today. Obviously, the past couple of days have been intense for the Black community, for everybody. So yesterday, Norman Powell shared his frustrations to the media, specifically on Jacob Blake's case. And for those who are unfamiliar with Jacob Blake's case, he was shot 7 times in the back by a police officer in Kenosha, Wisconsin last summer. And the charges have been, there's no charges on the officers that were involved. Now, with that being said, Akil, you were with me last time when we were talking about this when it first happened. How much do you feel has changed since from then?
Well, there's two fronts. It's a matter of perspective. I would say for me, myself personally, things have changed. Just last night, we had the state elect a black governor and another Jewish representative. First time that's happened in that state. That's like the first time that happened in any of the southern states, right? Apparently, we're having a transition of power in the United States. And I think the biggest change is if you look at the events that happened on the Capitol yesterday, you're seeing a rising level of frustration from a group that's being further and further alienated with the birth rates changing, the immigration rates changing, in the face of the United States changing, the browning, quote unquote, of America. These are the last efforts of a dying mentality lashing out. And I think, as you can see with the response globally, those people are further and further being put on the island. And I think a day like yesterday, which was such a dark day, I often say bad things can be good things too. I think this shone a light on the armpit of America. And a lot of those people think they won yesterday, but I think that's a win for us to see what can actually happen and what one of the true flaws are in the reaction to white people, quote unquote, protesting, as opposed to a collection of mixed race people, quote unquote, rioting.
Well, it's all in the nomenclature, like you said. At the end of the day, people are going to say what they want to say, and you use social media and weaponize it to elucidate a point if you want to or if you can. I think with, Donald J. Trump being banned from Twitter and banned from Facebook for making incendiary remarks because he is an arsonist firefighter. He's the guy who sets the fire, then yells that there's a fire, runs away and comes back to the bucket and says, see, this is what I'm doing. I'm saving everyone. No. And that is on the verge of being seditious. But let's speak about Jacob Blake and the idea that as a black person in America, you can't find justice. You can be shot 7 times. I mean, there's use of force and then there's excessive force. If you need to shoot someone 7 times to prove a point, you're probably doing too much. And to the degree that the Capitol Police in Washington, D.C., were helping people down the steps who were breaking into a federal building, they actually helped them. So what is the real response here? Like, what really matters in America, right? And I always say that we live in 2 Americas. I often call it the land of the thief, home of the slave. And people get mad at me, but that's what it is right now. And I wish more had changed, because how many years do we have to wait for the same things that are manifesting themselves in every other aspect, except like what you said, Akil, the dying vestiges of what once was.
To throw one last point, Savannah, I'll take the time too. But another thing that can come out of this too is they decided not to call the National Guard. And that was a decision that was premeditated. And they decided to call the National Guard premeditated on the other crowd. And just the fact that they made that decision and that happened yesterday, that's going to prove to a lot of people that don't believe in systemic racism. That was a systemic decision made by the governors and the leaders that didn't want to criminalize these quote unquote protesters prior to the event. I apologize. I know it took up a lot of time, but I feel like that was an important point to make.
Listen, we could talk all day on this one question and I'll be just fine. Trust me. Now, no secret. Like, America's divided. And, we've seen the Raptors and the Suns last night come together and try to, put on a united together type of demonstration before the game. And we've also in the past seen NBA teams, they've knelt, they've been outspoken, they've really tried to be vocal leaders in social justice. But my question is, if another tragedy happens, what more can the NBA do? Will, I'll go to you with this one first.
It's always funny how the oppressor looks to the oppressed to come up with the answer for why they shouldn't be oppressed anymore. You know the answer. The same effort you gave to oppress, you can give that same effort not to. So obviously there has to be some dialogue. You have to be able to say what you want. But the obligation for the NBA or any of its players, the WNBA or any of its players, who are very, very vital to what happened in Georgia, right? For them to be—
Say it a little louder, Will. Say it a little louder.
For them to be the arbiters of what needs to be done is irresponsible, disrespectful, and disingenuous. So while you keep your foot on people's necks, utilizing your social platforms to say what you need to say and your actions through your foundations, or whatever the case might be, that's what you can do. That is your role and your responsibility to make sure you continue to shine light on the darkness.
Nelson Mandela called it a long march to freedom. So I just want to remind people that your expectations shouldn't be measured in 6 months or 12 months. We are on a long march to freedom. Also, respect the fact that I do believe we kind of exist in the echo chamber. So your expectations of NBA players, when I feel like the NBA audience is pretty savvy and pretty relatable and liberal, there's only so much you can do on that stage. It's getting out to other stages, getting out. Those people who stormed the Capitol, they're not courtside at Lakers games. So there's only so much that we can do within our crowd. But just please remember, it is a long march to freedom, and let's not get caught up in markers and successes this early in a fight that's only just begun.
No, I love that point. And, Will, you touched it. And this is when I got me excited. You mentioned the WNBA and how they push. And I do want to see the NBA get to that level of social change where they're not just talking, like their words, their actions is really creating political differences. And don't get me wrong, the NBA definitely has been, by the fact that their arenas have been open as voting centers throughout the election this past year.
Absolutely.
And you haven't seen that before. But you're right, Akil, it is a long march. And there's only so much expectations we can put onto these players, given the crowd that actually does watch them. Thank you guys so much for having this conversation with me. Will, it's your first time on RTX. Hope to have you back.
No doubt.
You did good. You did good. You did good, kid. You did good.
Right. Oh, I appreciate it. I mean, I'm a professional. Don't try this at home, Akil.
That's where I'm doing it from, bro.
Akil. Thank you very much, guys. We got to go back to Paul Jones and Sherman Hamilton. You can catch the Friday night game at 10 p.m. Eastern on TSN and TSN 1050. The Raptors will be playing the Sacramento Kings. And speaking of which, quickly, guys, we got to go. One key of the game each. Jonesy, kick us off.
I'd say control the perimeter. They've got a dynamic young point guard in De'Aaron Fox. Got to make it tough for him. Keep him out of the lane.
And you?
I'll say you got to, once you control the perimeter, secure that rebound, one and done. Shut down that defensive glass. Don't give them second chance opportunities.
And quickly, how can we help get second chance opportunities as such, Sherm?
Well, I think if you're the Raptors, you're trying to constantly play at a faster pace, force that deep penetration. It's kind of like what's happening to them. They've got to penetrate, force the defense to switch and rotate. That creates some weakness on the back end and rebounding, and that should allow guys like Chris Boucher, maybe Aaron Baines, Alex Len, some of the guards in terms of OG Anunoby to get in there on the glass and create some second chance opportunities.
And Jones, I'll throw the question to you as well. How do we get other people involved into our offense? How do we create that? Real quick.
I think you create a confidence factor, Sav. Get it going with your defense, create turnovers, get easy basket. That becomes contagious, and now everybody's part of it. So I think it still goes back. Sherm talked about the rebounding, but I still think it goes back to the defense as well.
Thank you guys so much for having an open and honest conversation here on Raptors Today with me about other things. We got to go. Take care. Thanks for watching. You can click to watch our last episode or to subscribe to the Toronto Raptors YouTube channel so you don't miss an episode.